We're back. We're live. I'm Jay Fidell. This is ThinkTech. It's a 2 o'clock block on a given Thursday. And we're going to visit with Mark Hashimoto today. He's a very interesting general officer, lieutenant general in the Marine Corps. We really want to get to know Mark. Thank you for joining us today, Mark.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be with you, Jay. Really appreciate the Military Affairs Council providing me the opportunity to be on your show today.
And so do we. So you have an interesting career. It's different, than most of the careers we've talked to over the past several months of this series. And I would like to explore, the career, but also your motivations in handling it the way you have. To begin, right now, you occupy a kind of dual role at Camp Smith. Can you talk about it?
Right. So I am a reservist and have been since August of 1999. While I've progressed throughout the reserves from the rank of captain to major general, now I've also had a civilian career, and that civilian career has been as a federal civil servant working with the Marine Corps at Marine Corps Forces Pacific at Camp HM Smith here in IAEA. So I've had that dual career. It's been very complimentary. And currently, as a civilian, I am the executive director at Marine Forces Pacific and a member of the federal government's senior executive service. So I've had quite a parallel path, and I find that the two jobs have been very complementary over the past 20-something years.
But you only get paid for one of them, right?
Unless I take leave. I actually, when I do my reserve duty, I take leave or go with a leave without pay status from my civilian job. So as if people ask me how I do it, and my answer is always, the answer is extended work hours, but I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Okay, so you graduated from Punahou years ago, and so a Punahou graduate, and then you went to Stanford for a degree in economics, as I recall. And
that's right.
From there, you went to a degree. I forget the school, but you went to a degree in an MBA degree, and all
right.
Of
I
that
got my MBA at UCLA.
UCLA. So that's an interesting introduction, a preparatory education for the Marine Corps. When did you decide that the Marine Corps was where you wanted to go in your career?
That's an easy one to answer, and thanks for asking that question. You're right. I did not have a standard path, if you will. I was commissioned into the Marine Corps when I was 28 years old. The maximum age for that time, at least, it was 29. So there I found myself in my first year of business school at UCLA. And that's when Desert Storm and Desert Shield happened. And so I thought, this business education is reasonably interesting, the accounting, the marketing, the statistics, all of that. But I thought to myself, there at 26 years of age, I said, look at those men and women out there putting it on the line for their country. I think that's something that I can do. And if I don't take that opportunity now, I'm forever going to miss out on it. Didn't have a lot of military history in my background. I think some folks were part of the draft in the 60s and the 70s, but nobody in my immediate family had served in the military. And so I thought at the time, the Marines presented the greatest challenge. So I took my finals early at business school and went straight to officer candidate school in the summer of 1992. And here I am 28 plus years later.
Make it 29.
Right.
That's so interesting because it bespeaks of patriotism. It bespeaks of a concern for the country, a concern for service to the country. Not everybody has that. Not everybody had it in 1992 either. So what you had and you have a special feeling about that, don't you?
I think so. Things that drew me to it, obviously, were the service, especially with the Marine Corps. I'm an infantry officer, the physicality of it. So it's the mental, the physical, the moral challenges. And I would contend that there is no life that I would say is better for a young single person than to be an officer in the U.S. military. Because the day you hit whatever it is, as we call it in the Marine Corps, the fleet, the operating forces, you have a significant amount of responsibility from day one. And so it's been nothing but a great life. And like I said, I have made a transition into the reserves at some point, but have still maintained my association with the Marine Corps. So when various things happened, to include Operation Iraqi Freedom, my association with the reserves, I was mobilized and was able to participate in the early part of the war in Iraq.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, I'm very impressed because I was a reserve during Vietnam, and I thought reserves were really an important kind of a kind of element, if you will, in the military.
I think
They had a
they
different
absolutely.
view of things. Yeah.
Oh, no doubt. What I've found is that the average reservist, compared to his active duty counterpart, has a significantly more broad set of life experiences. So you figure out your career for yourself, and while the active duty lifestyle is great, it's challenging. Many things are arranged for you. It could be housing, it could be medical care, your own career, how you proceed. But as a reservist, you exercise a much greater degree of free will. You make your own decisions about when to be in, when to be out, and to be able to modulate your level of participation.
Yeah, and you can do both, which is we have living proof of that right here.
There's no doubt.
In 1975 or thereabouts, they ended the draft, and when they did, my immediate reaction, without even thinking too much about it, was not a good idea because you need a diverse kind of military. You need all sources. You need a representation of the country, not just volunteers. Although there really isn't an initiative these days to bring it back, there are people who feel that it would be a good idea to bring it back. You have any thoughts on this?
It's an interesting concept. I think the all volunteer force has worked for us largely. I think we have obviously the most effective military and the most effective joint force in the world. But one of the things I know is a challenge is the cost of personnel. And as the services try to modernize, I think that there is a balance between the personnel costs and then the costs of modernization. So at least within the Marine Corps, I know when we try to find sources of funding for what we call a fixed top line of funding, if you will, that General Berger, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, has said that he would reduce the level of personnel in the service to help pay for what are not inexpensive uh, efforts to modernize. So I'm not sure what it would do to the overall size of the force. I think we're certainly much smaller than we were even uh, around the time of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, or maybe a little bit before that. But I think the overall numbers have shrunk in terms of personnel because I think the overall cost per soldier, sailor, airman, Marine has increased over time.
Yeah, and part of your job is human resources, isn't it?
We are in the people business. And as I like to say, Jay, that an organization, and I think probably no matter what function it serves, will succeed or not based on its personnel policies.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, that comes from having an MBA, I'm sure.
Uh,
That had to be 101 on business education.
uh, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm sometimes asked about that, and certainly the communication and the writing skills, I think, definitely. But also the notion that I always bring up: nothing is free. Time is not free. Everything costs money. And while we don't operate in a kind of like a bottom line mentality, because there are built-in inefficiencies to the military, and there just has to be. Uh, Sometimes that kind of thinking can help. As is said, all the business. When you go into a business leader's office and he's got military books on his shelf, and you go into a military officer's office and he's got business books on his shelf because each side thinks the other side has it all figured out.
I've seen that.
We're trying to go good to great here.
Well, let me get the hierarchy straight so people know. So when you're finished being a bird colonel,
Mhm.
you get to be a brigadier general.
That's right.
And then when you finish that, you get to be a major general, and
Major
then
general.
after that, a lieutenant general,
A
and then
three-star is right.
a four-star general. Then you're the commandant of the Marine Corps, something
Or,
like
or,
that.
or a general, because there are other, yes, the Commandant of the Marine Corps is a four-star general, but there are other Marines who hold four-star rank, uh, combatant commanders, or the assistant commandant of the.
Interesting. Yeah. So you were appointed by Lloyd Austin to be a brigadier, rather a major general only recently. Huh? How did that change your life?
Uh, that's right. My I was promoted to Major General the 30th of March of this year, so I'm brand new in this rank. And while I would probably say that the difference in my life between being a brigadier general and a major general was not quite as great as when I went from being a colonel to being a brigadier general. So I've been in a general officer for over 3 years now with a major general rank. But other than that, it doesn't feel too different. I don't think the authorities are very different. I'm coming out of my previous job where I was actually a commanding general of a unit to being a staff officer. So it's been a really interesting challenge and one that I really look forward to.
I always felt that the Marine Corps was different, and I'm not sure why I felt that. I really can't articulate why I felt that way, but it does seem different. Can you articulate what the difference is?
That's a great question. And, I think that maybe you and members of the audience have heard the use of the word domain. So we talk about the various domains in which uh, we fight: the land domain, maritime, air, space, cyber. You can even say the human domain, cognitive domain. And the difference, I think, that you point out, Jay, is that the Marine Corps doesn't own any of those. The Army is associated with the land, the Air Force with the air, the Navy with the maritime. But what about the Marine Corps? What is our domain? And we have a term, a geographic term called the littorals. And the littoral domain, if you will, is the parts of the land that control the sea, as well as parts of the sea that control the land. That's our domain. We think we operate in. It's not doctrinal, if you will, but it's the fact that even though we don't lay claim to a specific domain, Jay, we operate in all of them. I think the U.S. Marine Corps has something like the seventh largest Air Force in the world. We obviously can operate on land as we have for the last couple of decades in the Middle East. And we can, obviously we were developed to operate in conjunction with the United States Navy and especially afloat and transitioning ashore. So I think that's what makes us different in that we're comfortable in all domains.
Over the past, I'd say, pick a number of 30 years, the military has changed dramatically. And one of the changes, with the technology, with geopolitical, evolutions. But one of the changes that I have noticed, that I'd be interested in your thoughts and your experience on this, is that military officers, especially senior officers, have more to do with diplomatic relations, foreign policy, engaging with their peers in other military and in civilian organizations in other countries. Am I right? And what kind of experience has that been for you? And how does it benefit the country?
Definitely at some point, Jay, you're right. You go into the mode of what is often called the warrior diplomat. And you really, the military is the most hierarchical of organizations. It is the most rank conscious, and it operates off of the theory of direct line of command or tasking. But as we're seeing that the problems and the challenges that we face today, and that's as a military, are not solved through direct hierarchical lines. You have to deal with what we refer to as people who are adjacent to you. So it becomes more of a matter of collaboration and cooperation, whether that's with the other services or whether it's with other countries or it's with the interagency. And the higher you progress in rank, the more prevalent that becomes, in terms of you being effective. There's very little, I think, especially dealing with the more complex problems that we have, that the military can, or certainly a single service can solve on its own. So those skills that you're talking about, I don't know if it's new or the world has changed that much. It certainly has changed from an information perspective, but those are the skills that are, probably going to be the ones that serve you most well, especially when you become a general officer.
And that has changed the Marine Corps, I'm sure. I mean, for example, we have the phenomenon of Afghanistan, where from political considerations and geopolitical considerations, we have decided, as a matter of national policy, to withdraw from Afghanistan, and that makes me think that maybe the whole global approach of the American military has changed, and we see our role not only in terms of the national policies, but policies and capabilities within the service have changed. It isn't like it was in, say, Vietnam.
I think, we still have generally the same elements of national power: diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. And it's how those work together. I think, along the lines of what you're saying, Jay, is we see that, maybe the informational and economic elements of national power possibly are, I think that's maybe what you're suggesting, are more in the forefront today, especially here in the Indo-Asia Pacific, where you have, 2/3 of the global economy is focused here. And that, not that, clearly all of those elements of national power have their role, but maybe it's, the thinking is along the lines that we are not going to achieve our national objectives by leading with our military force. The military force is all, the employment of the military is always in support of policy objectives. And I think out here, I think we have a very, very clear understanding of the role among all of the elements of national power that the U.S. military plays, certainly in conjunction with our interagency partners, our allies and partners, as well as all of the services working together.
I suppose you can make a case that the East Coast commands, which would cover jurisdictionally Europe and so forth. They're very important these days, especially with what is going on in Russia and Ukraine and so forth. But I would ask you, what is special about PACOM? Because PACOM seems to me to cover more territory, ocean and land, more countries, more, I think, wealth and power, perhaps these days, and more intricate, complex diplomatic relations and interests and risks. What do you think about that? Is PACOM different from any other command in the United States military?
It's the largest and the oldest of the what we call the combatant commands in the U.S. military, and you're exactly right. And this is a matter of record, from the President of the United States on down. What is the most consequential region to the future of the United States? And that's the Indo-Asia Pacific. So we talked about, the amount of population that resides here within our region. 52% of the Earth's surface. It reaches from the west coast of the United States all the way to the India-Pakistan border, and from Antarctica to the North Pole. So besides being 52% of the globe, having most of the people, having most of the economic activity on the globe, you also have, most, the main threats that, has been articulated by national leadership, include China, Russia, North Korea, and violent extremist organizations. You add to that population growth, climate change, pandemics, natural disasters, and you have what is not in terms of countries, most numerically large, but I think definitely the most consequential and complex region out there, and the one that, it matters most to the future of our country. So, it's been more than a decade since I think President Obama talked about the pivot to the Pacific, the rebalance to the Pacific. And, I'll throw something out there. Even though in my position here, it's called a joint billet. So while I wear a Marine Corps uniform, I work at a joint headquarters that seeks to synchronize the activities of all the services. I am a United States Marine, and I would say that while many places around the globe represent areas where it's a good place for the Marine Corps to operate, the Indo-Asia Pacific is why you have a United States Marine Corps. You just need to look at the map, and it pretty much tells that story.
Oh, very exciting to be here. And when I say
It is
here,
exciting. Exciting is the word, Jay. It is exciting, absolutely.
more things are happening. There's more there's more change going on, and more change that affects us. So I guess I'm really interested in whether Hawaii will remain. I mean, right now Hawaii has been Camp Smith and SINCPAC for years and years and years. It has been looking over the Pacific, so to speak, since the war. Query:
Yes.
is it going to stay that way?
I think it's going to stay that way and it's going to grow. So when you look at the map behind me and you think about some of the anchors of our posture here in the Pacific from the days of sail when the Spanish galleons would go from Mexico and have their water resupplied in Guam on their way to Manila, or in the age of steam where we had where those ships would replenish their coal supplies at advanced naval bases throughout this region. You have Hawaii, which has always been a strategic location. And the thing about Hawaii, Jay, here is the location of all of the service commands. So when you have some of these other commands, whereas here, it's probably maybe a 15-minute drive from Camp Smith to Fort Shafter to Pearl Harbor to Hickam. And there's that concentration of command and control on this island. I'm speaking to you from the Nimitz-MacArthur headquarters building here overlooking Pearl Harbor and Hickam. And it's that centrality of the command and control here that is unique, it is effective, and it is something that we obviously have to make resilient and be able to defend in a future conflict. But that's why Hawaii is always going to be so important. And it also has to do with our posture. People ask the Marine Corps and others, where do you want to be in the Pacific? And the answer is the same to every question: as far west as possible. So when you think about US territory, the state of Hawaii and obviously the territory of Guam represent those most forward locations that we can be in addressing the challenges, especially deterrence here in this region.
It strikes me you described these various commands that all collaborate with each other and only a few minutes away. There's another element to that, it seems to me, is that these individuals, your peers, get to see each other. In other places, it's not that easy to see each other. You may be miles away and have to deal electronically without seeing each other. But here you can actually know the people, press the flesh, so to speak, of your colleagues. Is that true?
That is exactly right. We know each other. We see each other at social events. People's spouses get to know each other. You get to know their families, and so that is we would call that a combat multiplier. Knowing who you are going to fight alongside makes a big difference. Not that you couldn't do it other ways, but it makes a huge difference. And I totally agree with you, Jay.
So can we talk a minute about mobilization administrator? Is that your title for
Mobilization assistant?
Assistant. What is that, and how does that relate to this coordination we're talking about, and perhaps more important to people in Hawaii, how does it relate to the engagement of the military and the civilian communities?
Thank you very much for that. I think you and many of the people that might be tuning in knew or know my predecessor, Major General Susie Verislam, and the job that she did here for the last 3 years. And so she really redefined the position. There are mobilization assistants at all of what we call the combatant commands, at the services, and those are National Guard or Reserve officers who serve in these billets where technically they are the premier experts on the integration of reserve forces. But I mentioned my predecessor, Major General Verislam. Really what she brought to this unique command that has a relationship with the state and the county within which the headquarters resides, which is like no other combatant command in the United States. The relationship with the state of Hawaii that Admiral Davidson especially, and all of the combatant commanders before him have developed over the last few years. Much of the credit goes to Major General Vera Slum, and born and raised here as I was, who understands the local community, what the issues are, and can serve as a champion here at this headquarters, whether it's for the congressional delegation, the state legislature, other entities around town, that having someone who understands what's going on, why something is important, and being able to communicate that at the general officer level to the command, I think makes a huge difference. So I think my role, and it's the one that Susie really established, is to maintain the momentum on the initiatives that she was able to keep going. They are many of the people know about what the services have going on here, whether it's the Homeland Defense radar, the renewal of the leases at Pohakaloa training area, the Red Hill fuel tanks, and many other land use issues here, which can get quite complex, and helping the command work its way through that in a way that is successful for both the local community and the military. So I see that as my primary role, is maintaining the momentum of the things that Susie started.
Yeah, and it really pays to have somebody who was born and raised here in that role to understand both sides of the equation. But I did want to ask you about an expectation, if you will, of the civilian community. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Is that one of these days we're going to have extreme weather? Who knows what kind of natural disaster? And we may or may not have the, what do you want to call it, the human resources resilience to deal with that, the infrastructure to deal with that. And people say, not to worry, the U.S. military is here in force and they will help us. Is it true? And to what extent is it true?
The help will, of course, always be there. I think that if we found ourselves in that situation that you're talking about, there would obviously be the involvement also of the Hawaii National Guard, which has, Major General Hara, his forces, which have significant capability. But then there would be the assistance from the U.S. military, obviously, with all the, and not just for the bases and the families and the family, the other. Just our own facilities, but of course, the military would work with the state to do that. The exact ways that would happen, the capabilities that would be brought, obviously there are transportation assets, would depend on the specifics of it. But the thing that I think everybody should know about the military in Hawaii is that there is no more reliable, long-term, or accountable partner for the state than the U.S. military here. Not to say that everything is always going to be perfect. There can be competing interests there, but the military, not just in the case of a natural disaster response, but whether it's the stewardship of the environment, and again, of course, to protect our property, our civilians, and our interests in the region, that there is no better partner that the state could have than the U.S. military.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I think we all do. So one last area I'd like to inquire about, Mark, before we close, and that is this. It's your career. I mean, I sit here and read your bios, and I look and hear you, express on all these points, and I say to myself, what a great career, what a fabulous career. What's the secret sauce for you? You made a decision, you were able to implement it, and well. But how do you do that? Can you share that with us?
I've been very blessed, Jay, and obviously it starts with the support of my family, my wife Kathy, who I always said that if anybody else got the amount of support that she's given me, they would be at least in my positions, if not higher. So what I would characterize it, Jay, is I think of myself as a person of average ability with maybe slightly above average work ethic. And when people ask me about my last promotion, I said it's indicative of simply one thing. And it's a reflection of people that I've worked with, that have worked for me, and for whom I've worked. It's not about me, but without those three groups of people and the quality that I've been blessed with to serve, the quality of those Marines, that's made all the difference. And I think that's clearly, and because of God's grace, that's where I am today, Jay.
And your thoughts about, joining the military? I'm always sensitive to that because I had a military experience. It's only 6 years, but I got to know all the services. I was a lawyer in the Coast Guard. And it strikes me that that was really probably the best time in my life in terms of dealing with people and feeling I was doing something useful. And so, query, what is your advice to young people who might think about following in the path you've taken?
I would say that while maybe it's not for everybody, it's a great life. And if you're looking for challenge, if you're looking for adventure, camaraderie, purpose, I think there's a difference between quality of life and quality of living. Quality of living means you have things and conveniences and things like that, but quality of life is that you come to work with purpose every day and wearing the uniform. And it sounds maybe a little bit trite, to be part of something larger than yourself. There are many ways to serve your country. There are many ways to be involved in security or defense without being necessarily a uniform member of the military. And I think any of those options is a great way to start one's career. And whether you stay for your initial contract of 4 or 6 years, or 26 or 36, I can't think of a better life.
And I want to offer one more thought, Mark. Coming to this show, I was listening to Hawaii Public Radio, and Marco Werman, who does some great reporting on Hawaii Public Radio, National Public Radio, was interviewing a fellow in India. Now, this guy was a member of a volunteer organization that was trying to help, in the super duper crisis they're having now on COVID. And he was a tremendous interview, and he made very important statements. And at the end of the interview, Marco Werman asked him, "Why are you doing this? Why are you putting your own life at risk and the lives of your family at risk to act as a volunteer and try to help people who are sick and dying? Is it for India? Is it for yourself? Is it for your family? What is it for?" And he said, "All of that, but ultimately, it's for humanity." And if you take the position that the United States is a humane country with high moral standards, and its policies are high moral standards, and its military, as you said, is committed to implement those policies, then it's more than just patriotism, isn't it?
I think so. You think about the vision that is expressed by the Indo-Pacific about a free and open Indo-Pacific. And it is about that free. It's about freedom, and freedom from coercion. Freedom, in the traditional security sense, and that we would live in a free and open society, that within this region, we would have open access to the sea lanes and the airspace that the people and the economies depend upon. But it's about the freedom of the human spirit. I think he had it right that, ultimately at the deepest level of service, I think that's what it could be about. I can't claim that I had those kinds of lofty thoughts when I walked through the door with the Marine Corps, but many decades of reflection. Again, I talk about the camaraderie, I talk about the physical and the mental and the moral challenges. That's more of an inward focused thing. But I think that individual was right.
Thank you, Mark. Mark Hashimoto, Major General, the United States Marine Corps, a Marine to start and to finish all his life, a Marine. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you, Jay. Really appreciate the time.
Aloha.